Thank you, MC. In trying to keep with the green, I've tried to keep the flashback on the phone to save paper. And also, just apologies for wearing a tie. I didn't realize that it was an informal occasion. I'm going to keep it quite short and just reminisce on last year's key areas of focus. As the MC mentioned, we had the governor of the Reserve Bank last year as the key agitator. And he gave quite a provocative speech around regional integration, which has been a key theme for the Business Roundtable over the last number of years. We also had, for the first time, a contribution from a youth table, and I believe they are here again today. The contribution last year was quite robust and at times boisterous, but I think it was a key and important contribution to the greater discussion around both regional integration and also how the youth can contribute to development within the region. So just quickly, in terms of regional integration, it's been a key theme for the last couple of years in terms of the Business Roundtable. Last year, some of the key challenges that were highlighted by the agitator are really political economy challenges that I think are quite well known, but he reflected on them quite well. I'm just going to articulate them very quickly and then move on to some of the key themes and focus areas around which he felt that regional integration can both act as a facilitator and be a consequence of in terms of these key themes. So just quickly, in terms of the challenges, the first key challenge I think that was quite importantly highlighted was the fact that the current model of integration cannot necessarily be based on existing regional agreements or existing regional economic communities. And the key example here was the SACU revenue formula and how you would think about trying to extend that, to example, to the SADC regional community or even beyond that. That's obviously quite a difficult thing to do, and it's not something that would be feasible at a political or economic perspective. Secondly, in terms of timeframes, often these regional agreements are based on highly unrealistic timeframes. Again, SADC was used as an example. As we sit today, we should be 6 years into a customs union within SADC, with the SADC customs union expected to have been implemented in 2010. So at a very high level, often these timeframes are quite unrealistic. The third key challenge was around this, the country's spaghetti bowl in terms of regional integration. And what you see is that many countries in the African continent and even within Southern Africa are members of multiple regional economic communities. That makes regional integration on its own a very difficult process. And what you see is that in the country we're in today, for example, it is a member of multiple economic communities, and trying to implement different agreements across different regions within the same country becomes a very difficult and complex thing to achieve. Finally, the key challenge that was highlighted was around the key disjuncture between political pronouncements and political agreements that there needs to be deeper regional integration with what actually happens on the ground. What you see is at a very high level, often there's agreements that political agreements that regional integration needs to take place, but on the ground, this is hardly ever implemented in the way that it was conceived at the high levels. After highlighting these challenges, I mean, the agitator was quite responsive in highlighting how 5 key factors can contribute to regional integration, facilitate regional integration, but is also often a consequence of regional integration. And again, I'll touch on these quite quickly. The key factors were trade, infrastructure, technology, finance, and finally the movement of people. So quite obviously, regional integration is a key factor around the movement of goods. And in terms of trade and goods and services, cross-border trade is quite important. And facilitating this is one of the key aims in terms of regional integration. But obviously, this requires both a reduction in non-tariff barriers, but also a reduction in the costs of moving these goods and services across borders. And achieving that would be a key important factor in regional integration. Second, in terms of infrastructure, that's related directly to the cost of movement of goods, but also within the greater framework in terms of regional integration, the development of infrastructure links both countries and cities, and also is important in ensuring that not only the reduction of costs of goods is reduced, but also in terms of ensuring that there's a greater development and harmonization across the region. Third, in terms of technology, technology has been a key factor in leapfrogging, in many cases, natural constraints to the movement of goods and people across borders, both in terms of infrastructure and in terms of constraints that are placed at the border level by people themselves. And this is key examples of this can be provided in both telecommunications and banking, for example. But in order to enhance and harness the technological advancements, you do need common policies and coordination of regulations across the various countries and communities. And this is required in order to enhance the position that technology plays in reducing and encouraging development across regions. In terms of finance, the reduction of transaction costs improves access to finance, facilitates the movement of capital across regions, and enhances the ability of countries to attract finance for developmental purposes. This is one of the key aims in terms of regional integration and is an important factor in encouraging development across the regions. And then finally, in terms of the movement of people, this is often one of the most neglected, but one of the most important purposes of regional integration, the enhanced movement and freer movement of people across the regions. As we sit here today in customs union, it's quite clear that the region, both within terms of SACU and in terms of SADC, has a long way to go to encourage the freer movement of people across the borders. So those were the 5 factors that were highlighted as key to facilitating and being a consequence of regional integration. In terms of rounding off the discussion, it was agreed that this roundtable itself can contribute to the process by strengthening ties between government and business stakeholders, and also raising issues that can be addressed jointly by these stakeholders. In terms of the youth, they made an important contribution, both in terms of the discussion around regional integration, but also in terms of a wider discussion about how the youth can contribute to both regional integration, but also to development for future purposes. In terms of this, while providing quite a unique and boisterous at times contribution to the discussion, in the end, the youth were also tasked with finding ways to ensure that the knowledge and learnings from elder generations was transferred to the younger generations, and to identify how they can contribute to the concept of Magogoism. I'm sure that they will update us on these actions and how they have subsequently implemented various activities to contribute to these discussions. So that is really the background to today's discussion, and I'll leave it there and hand over back to the MC.